Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, respectively. My name is Tiffany McConnell, and this is my organizational behavior midterm presentation. I had the case study on Alan Mulally, CEO of Ford Motor Company, and I found him to be very interesting. I'm really glad I got this case study. It was very interesting to me. So first, I'd like to talk about our agenda for this presentation. We're going to cover the background of the Ford Motor Company. Um, it's such an extensive company, and I don't know anyone who doesn't know the Ford brand. Excuse me. So I thought that definitely going into some history and some background on the company would be very, very good for everyone. And then after the background, we're going to talk about the main issues facing the Ford Motor Company right before and during Alan Mulally's takeover as CEO. We're going to analyze some of the issues that were going on and talk about some potential solutions. And then I'm going to talk about the One Ford vision, which Mulally developed, and it was an updated vision or mission statement basically for Ford. And also, he listed expected behaviors that he expected of his employees. Then I'll conclude the presentation. So background, like I said, Ford's been around for over 100 years, and it's just truly amazing that any one company can be around that long. It's a very iconic name, and of course, Henry Ford is credited with inventing the very first automobile, the Model T Ford, in 1903. What I didn't know when I was researching some background on this company, though, is that Ford built the first ever truck, the Model TT, in 1917. It was weighted for 1 ton to carry, so I thought that was pretty cool. And then in 1956, Ford became a publicly traded company. And in 1959, Ford Credit is founded. And I did not know that Ford had a credit company to its name. So that was something else interesting that I found out. And two things that I did and did not know. I knew about the Mustang with Ford, but I didn't know it had been around since 1964. And the Mustang is probably one of the most iconic vehicles ever to be made. You'll probably never meet an individual who doesn't know what the Mustang is, at least not in the U.S. My dad actually, funny story, my dad bought one of the first Mustangs in 1964. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then I'm a big science and space nerd, so this little tidbit of information was very interesting as well. Back in 1965, Ford owned a company called Philco, and Ford Philco actually designed the electronics for the Mission Control Center used to put a man on the moon. And so that kind of blew my mind. And like I previously stated, Ford has been around for over 100 years. In 2003, they celebrated their 100-year anniversary. And in 2006 is when Alan Mulally was named CEO of Ford Motor Company. He was previously of Boeing. As we know, Boeing is in the commercial airline industry and is a very competitive industry, a very competitive company. Boeing has also been through ups and downs. So when I learned that Alan Mulally came from Boeing, I thought, well, man, that's a great guy to come in and take over Ford. So hopefully he could do some really good things with the company. And this is a quote that Mulally stated in our book, in our textbook. When he took over Ford, he said, "I am here to save an American and global icon." And I thought that statement was so deep because he's recognizing that Ford is an American and global icon, that it's a huge name and it's been around for decades. And he says, I'm going to come in and I'm going to save this company. I'm going to do whatever it takes, basically. So he's really talking, he's really showing his determination, his commitment to the company here. All right, so some of the main issues when Mullally took over Ford was that Mullally took over when Ford was on the verge of a financial collapse. They Ford is mainly known for its pickup trucks and the Mustang, but yet it had dozens of brands: Mercury, Land Rover, Lincoln, Aston Martin, all these different brands, and yet people really could only identify with two different vehicles that they made. So they were really losing money, especially as the economy was starting to turn downward in 2006, 2007, and then in 2008 when the recession hit the American economy. But before it actually hit in 2008, people were kind of, getting worried, and people were not wanting to buy luxury vehicles and huge gas guzzlers. They were becoming more concerned about fuel efficiency and about the impact on the economy from all the emissions and smog and things like that, especially here where we live in Atlanta. I know on some mornings driving in, if the smog is really bad, you can see it. It's almost like just a cloud cover around the city. So people began to become really concerned about this. And unfortunately, Ford didn't have an option for them. They didn't have a smaller, compact vehicle, electric car, or more fuel efficient vehicles. So that was a huge issue. Um, and also, the senior leaders, quote unquote, killed the Taurus because they had made it the prior year before Mullally took over. And in our book, it stated that they made it like a football and it didn't do well. So basically, the Taurus wasn't doing well. The senior leaders felt that the brand was too damaged. So they just killed it and they renamed it the 500. And then, of course, the 2008 market crash hit everyone really hard, but Ford especially. So, a little bit of an analysis of the issues that we've been talking about. And this is kind of a quick breakdown for between 2006 and 2009. I wanted you guys to be able to see what all Ford had actually lost. They lost $12.6 billion in 2006. They lost way less in 2007, and then in 2008, when the market crashed, they lost $14.7 billion. That's huge. And then in 2009, they were only able to report their first quarter 1.4 billion loss, and I'm assuming that's because this book was published in 2011, so that was probably the last statistic that Helrigel and Slocum were able to obtain. And when Mullally took over, one of the first things he said was, "Hey, where's the Taurus?" And that's when the senior leaders told him, "Hey, we killed it. We felt it was, it was too badly damaged." And this really frustrated and upset Mullally because he felt like the Taurus was one of the oldest brands, other than the Mustang, and the truck, of course, of Ford. So he felt like the Taurus had already built a brand loyalty, and it takes billions of dollars to build a brand loyalty. And then for the senior leaders to just come along and kill it, he felt like that was a very poor business move. So he demanded that they bring it back. He said they could keep the 500, but he demanded they bring the Taurus back as well. And he quote unquote said that they better make it the coolest car they've ever made. So in 2010, they launched the new Taurus. And this picture on this slide is actually a 2013 Taurus, but the 2010 looked very similar. And it does look similar to the 500 as well. And then further on the analysis, I just wanted to again talk about Mullally. He was bringing 40 years worth of experience to Ford. That's huge. So he had 40 years of experience at Boeing in the competitive commercial airline industry. So he had a lot of expertise. He was pretty much the perfect man for the job to come in and take over and try and help Ford and bring it back up to profitability. And because of his expertise, Mullally sensed a recession in 2006 before it actually hit in 2008. So what he did, he decided to borrow against Ford's assets which is a risk. And I feel like that kind of echoes what we were talking about in last week's discussion about taking risks and that risk versus benefit type of business scenario. But and again, Mullally was willing to take this risk by borrowing against Ford's assets and accruing more debt. But the benefit or the positive outcome of this is that when the recession hit, Ford did not have to take out government loans, which is huge because it allowed Ford to be more independent. You know, if you take out government loans, then the government's going to have a lot of control about how, where, when, and why you conduct business. And Mullally did not want that type of manipulation on the Ford company. So instead, he did extensive research. I found this very interesting. He spoke and interviewed several employees and did his own research. He filled 5 binders worth of research and information before he began as CEO. So again, this really speaks to his dedication to the company. This was not a no-win situation for him. He was not going to back down. He was going to do whatever it took to bring this company back to profitability and um, restore faith in the Ford name. And so let's talk about some solutions that Mullally brought to the Ford Motor Company. And again, he sensed that recession, so that was huge, and he was able to borrow against Ford's assets. He also wanted to attempt to integrate the company globally, which had kind of failed previously. Um, other brands and names had done well overseas and in other markets, and Ford unfortunately was not one of them. But Mullally was determined to make that a reality, and they developed the Focus and the Fiesta over in Europe, and actually they did very well. They were smaller, more compact, more fuel-efficient vehicles. And I don't know if anyone's ever been to Europe. The streets are sometimes cobblestone, sometimes they're old, they're very narrow. Sometimes there's not a lot of lanes. So you just don't see big SUVs usually in a lot of parts of Europe. So Ford developed the Focus and Fiesta over there. They were doing well. And in 2010, Mullally brought those to America and began selling them in North America. And they've done extremely well. And again, that's because of the market and the customers changing what they wanted. Many people were no longer wanting these big luxury SUVs that were expensive and sucked gas. They wanted cheaper, more fuel efficient, safe vehicles that they could get from A to B every day on very little gas. And some more solutions. Mullally talked Ford into discontinuing Mercury altogether. And then he persuaded Bill Hurd to sell off Jaguar, Aston Martin, and Land Rover to other areas where there was still a market for those type of luxury vehicles. And at first I thought, wow, you know, Jaguar, Aston Martin, Land Rover, those are expensive vehicles. That should be a lot of revenue for Ford. But since there wasn't a market for it here, they were just losing billions and billions of dollars on those brands. I mean, you figure if you're in a recession, most people are not going to wake up tomorrow and decide to go buy an Aston Martin. So that was a big money saving technique that Mullally allowed come to pass for Ford. So ultimately, they went from 97 to 40 brands. So this eliminated that brand overload that they had, where there was just so many brands they couldn't focus on building one up and making one really, really good. Because they had basically, for lack of a better terminology, they had their fingers in too many parts of the pie. So Mullally reduced the brands and focused on the Ford and Lincoln name to really build these up, and he wanted each of these to have a best in class for small cars, midsize, and a truck. And something else that Mullally did that was amazing and really helped Ford overall was he built a teamwork and a goal program titled One Ford. And this kind of echoed Boeing because in one of our previous assignments, it talked about um, we had to answer discussion questions on Boeing, and Boeing built a one Boeing quote unquote mindset and teamwork mentality. And so Mullally kind of echoes this in what he does in Ford by making the One Ford program. And essentially, what One Ford was, it was an updated vision or definition of the company and also what Mullally expected from his employees or expected behaviors. So Mullally made these plastic cards and handed them out to everybody. And on one side, it had the vision or definition, and on the other side, it had the expected behaviors. And again, this is echoing that One Ford or One Boeing from where Mullally came from, in that his updated vision for Ford was one team, one plan, and one goal. And he also talks about um, how this global enterprise for automotive leadership is measured by the customer, the employee, the dealer, the investor, the supplier, the union council, and community satisfaction. And basically, he's saying that these are all the people that we have to think about and we have to try and please and make content. And then the one plan, he's talking about how he's going to restructure and operate the company for profitability. And the goal, offering an exciting, viable Ford that's going to deliver profitability and growth. Um, and through this one team, one plan, one goal, you can really see the team's competency that he's trying to develop here. And it's also giving people that sense of one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the sense of affiliation or need for affiliation. So he's allowing people to feel, by saying one or one Ford, one team, he's allowing everyone to feel connected and feel affiliated with one another. That will overall increase employee satisfaction and employee retention. So that was on one side of his card. And then on the other side that the employees had was the expected behaviors to foster functional and technical excellence. So here he's setting a high excellence standards, own working together, again, fulfilling that individual's need for affiliation, role model for values. So here, by having high values and high excellence standards, he's attempting to develop an ethics competency in the company and with his employees. And then, of course, you have to be able to deliver results. And lastly, another thing that I thought was really great in our textbook, Mullally is quoted saying, communicate, communicate, communicate. And this is huge because he's saying, people can't change and a company can't change and take on new ideas and new responsibilities if the goal isn't clearly stated, if updates are not communicated, and if expectations are not communicated. Then people don't know what they're doing, they don't know how they're supposed to be doing it, and they don't know how they're doing if goals and landmarks are not being met. So Mullally is really stating here how he values communication. And so that is him attempting to facilitate the communication competency. All right, and just in conclusion, obviously Mullally he has a very relentless attitude, and he has a cunning business sense. He foresaw the recession. He had the insight to know that the market was changing, that what people were wanting was changing. They were wanting more fuel efficient vehicles, not big luxury vehicles. And then, of course, his development of the team and team change and communication competencies through his One Ford vision. I think Mullally did an amazing job with Ford. He brought the company back to profitability. He got rid of the brand overload, and really restored a lot of people's faith in the Ford name. And so I definitely applaud him for doing that. I did find out he is no longer with Ford, though. He did retire. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.